I never thought I'd be standing at my own daughter's wedding, holding my purse like a shield, while she pointed at me and said the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our family. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand how we got here. Because this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about discovering who people really are when they think no one's watching. My name is Margaret, and I'm 72 years old. For the past 50 years, I've been a mother first, a wife second, and somewhere buried beneath all of that, maybe myself third. My daughter Emily is 38. She's my only child. Her father, my husband Robert, passed away 6 years ago after a long battle with cancer. Those final 2 years, I was his primary caregiver. Emily visited maybe twice during that entire time. She always had reasons. Work was demanding. Her boyfriend at the time needed her support. Traffic was terrible. The excuses piled up like unpaid bills. After Robert died, I thought Emily and I would grow closer. I imagined us having coffee together, sharing memories, rebuilding what we'd lost during those difficult years. Instead, the distance between us grew wider. She'd call every few weeks, conversations lasting maybe 5 minutes. Always rushed. Always somewhere else she needed to be. I told myself she was processing grief differently. Everyone handles loss in their own way. Then 2 years ago, she met David. He came from what Emily called a prominent family. His parents owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states. His mother, Patricia, had her name on a hospital wing. His father, George, sat on multiple corporate boards. From the moment Emily introduced me to them at a charity gala, I could feel Patricia's eyes measuring me, finding me lacking. My dress wasn't designer. My jewelry wasn't impressive. My late husband had been a high school teacher, not a businessman. In Patricia's world, I was nobody. Emily started changing after that. She'd correct my grammar in public. She'd suggest I update my wardrobe before family events. Once, she actually asked me to say I'd been a school administrator instead of a teacher's wife, if anyone asked. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. The look on her face told me she was deadly serious. That's when I first felt it, that cold whisper of doubt. Was my daughter ashamed of me? The engagement happened fast. David proposed after dating for only 8 months. Emily called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice bright with excitement. She talked about the ring, the proposal at a vineyard, how perfect everything was. Then she mentioned the wedding. They were planning something big. Really big. Patricia was handling most of the arrangements because, according to Emily, she had connections and experience with events of this scale. I offered to help in any way I could. Emily said she'd let me know. Weeks passed. I'd ask about the wedding, and Emily would give vague answers. The date was set for June. The venue was exclusive. The guest list was being finalized. When I asked if I could contribute financially, there was a long pause on the phone. Then Emily said, "Mom, the Harrisons are covering everything. They want to. It's their gift to us." Something in her tone made me feel like I'd committed a social error just by offering. 3 months before the wedding, Emily invited me to lunch. We met at a restaurant I could barely afford, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the portions are designed for people who don't actually need to eat. Emily looked beautiful, polished, like she'd stepped out of a magazine. We made small talk. She showed me photos of the venue on her phone. It looked like a castle. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding ceremony. Patricia thinks, and I agree, that it would be better if you sat in the 3rd row instead of the front. David's family is quite large, and there are certain people who really should have those prominent seats. You understand, right?" I stared at her. "I'm your mother, Emily. The front row is where the mother of the bride sits." She sighed like I was being difficult about something trivial. "It's just 1 row back. It's not a big deal. I need you to be flexible here. This wedding is important." I wanted to argue. I wanted to remind her of every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd stayed up when she was sick, every school play and soccer game and graduation I'd attended. Instead, I swallowed hard and nodded. "If that's what you want." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand." But I didn't understand. Not really. I just didn't want to fight. I didn't want to be the problem mother who made things difficult. So I smiled and changed the subject, and we finished lunch with me feeling smaller than I had in years. The weeks leading up to the wedding were lonely. Emily was always busy with preparations. I'd see photos on social media of her and Patricia shopping together, attending tastings, visiting the venue. In every picture, they looked like mother and daughter. I was barely mentioned. When people asked Emily about her family in the comments, she'd talk about the Harrisons. I became invisible. 1 week before the wedding, I received a package. Inside was my dress for the ceremony. I hadn't picked it. Emily had chosen it with Patricia's input. It was beige. Plain. The kind of dress that blends into walls. The note said, "Thought this would be perfect for you. Love, Emily." There was no request for my opinion, no invitation to go shopping together. Just a beige dress in a box. I hung it in my closet and cried. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather. Sunny, warm, not a cloud in sight. I woke up at 5, unable to sleep. My house felt too quiet, too empty. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking at old photo albums. Pictures of Emily as a baby, as a toddler, as a gap-toothed first grader holding my hand. In every photo, she was smiling. In every photo, I was there. When had that changed? When did I become someone she needed to hide? I got dressed slowly, carefully. The beige dress fit well enough, though it made me look washed out and tired. I did my makeup, trying to add some color to my face. I wore the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. It was the nicest piece of jewelry I owned. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone's forgotten relative, someone invited out of obligation. The ceremony was at 3. I arrived at 2:30, driving my 12-year-old sedan into a parking lot filled with Mercedes and BMWs and Teslas. The venue was even more impressive in person. It looked like something from a fairy tale, all stone columns and manicured gardens and fountain features. A woman with a clipboard and a headset directed me inside. The ceremony space was breathtaking. White flowers everywhere. Crystal chandeliers. Chairs covered in silk. I found my assigned seat in the 3rd row, just as Emily had requested. The front 2 rows were filling with people I didn't know. David's relatives, I assumed. They all had that same polished look. Expensive suits. Designer dresses. The kind of confidence that comes from never worrying about money. Patricia was holding court in the front row, greeting guests like a queen. She wore a pale blue gown that probably cost more than my car. When she saw me, her eyes swept over my beige dress with barely concealed satisfaction. She gave me a tight smile and a small wave, then turned back to someone more important. The ceremony began. Music swelled. The wedding party walked down the aisle. Bridesmaids in emerald green, groomsmen in tailored black tuxedos. Then Emily appeared at the back of the room, and my breath caught. She looked absolutely stunning. Her dress was magnificent, lace and silk and tiny crystals that caught the light. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a princess. But she didn't look at me. Not once as she walked down the aisle. Her eyes were fixed on David, who stood at the altar looking appropriately emotional. I watched my daughter glide past my 3rd row seat like I wasn't there. Like I was just another guest. The woman next to me whispered, "Isn't she beautiful?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The ceremony proceeded. Traditional vows. Exchange of rings. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and building a future together. I should have been happy. I should have been crying tears of joy. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my daughter's wedding, and I felt like an outsider. Then came the moment that changed everything. The officiant had just pronounced them husband and wife. David had kissed Emily. Applause filled the room. The music should have started. The newly married couple should have walked back down the aisle together. But instead, Emily turned to face the guests. David looked confused. Clearly this wasn't in the program. Emily raised her hand, and the room fell silent. "Before we continue," Emily said, her voice clear and strong, "I have something I need to say." My heart started pounding. Something about her tone felt wrong. She looked directly at me then, her eyes cold. The entire room followed her gaze. Suddenly, 300 people were staring at me. "I want everyone here to know," Emily continued, "that my mother was not supportive of this marriage. She has been difficult and demanding throughout this entire process. She's made comments about David's family that were completely inappropriate. And honestly, I'm tired of pretending everything is fine." The room was dead silent. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Mom," Emily said, her voice somehow both sad and firm, "I think it would be better if you left. This day is about me and David and our future. And I can't have your negative energy here anymore." Time stopped. I sat frozen in my 3rd row seat while 300 strangers stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to pity to barely concealed schadenfreude. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered. Patricia was watching me with what looked like triumph in her eyes. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to stand up and tell everyone that Emily was lying, that I'd never said anything inappropriate, that I'd done nothing but love and support her. But my voice wouldn't work. My body wouldn't move. I just sat there, publicly humiliated at my own daughter's wedding. Mom, Emily said again, gentler this time but no less final, please leave. Somehow I stood up. My legs were shaking. My hands were trembling. I picked up my purse and started making my way toward the aisle. I had to walk past dozens of rows of people, all of them watching me, judging me, believing whatever narrative Emily had created. The walk felt endless. My vision was blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not yet. Not in front of them. I was almost to the exit when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, quick footsteps. A man's voice said, "Mrs. Thompson, wait." I turned. It was Harrison, David's best man. I'd met him briefly at the rehearsal dinner the night before. He was David's college roommate, a lawyer from what I remembered. He was tall, serious-looking, with the kind of face that didn't smile easily. He was carrying a leather portfolio. Harrison caught up with me just as I reached the exit doors. Behind us, the ceremony space had erupted in confused whispers. I could hear Emily saying something, her voice sharp and irritated. Patricia was probably coaching her on how to manage this disruption. But I couldn't focus on any of that because Harrison was standing in front of me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly, "I need you to come back inside. Please. Trust me." I shook my head. "I can't. You heard her. She wants me gone." "She does," Harrison agreed. "But there's something you need to see. Something everyone needs to see. Right now." Something in his tone made me pause. He wasn't being cruel or mocking. He seemed almost apologetic, but also determined. Like he was on a mission he couldn't abandon. "Please," he said again. 5 minutes. Then if you want to leave, I'll walk you out myself." I didn't understand what was happening, but I nodded. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was just so broken that I'd follow anyone who spoke to me with basic kindness. We walked back toward the ceremony space together, Harrison slightly ahead, clearing a path through the confused guests who'd started spilling into the hallway. When we entered the room, Emily's face went from surprise to angry in an instant. "What are you doing?" I asked her to leave. "I know," Harrison said calmly. "But before she goes, there's something that needs to be addressed." He turned to David, who looked completely lost. "David, I'm sorry, man. I know this isn't what you wanted, but you need to hear this too." David opened his mouth to respond, but Patricia cut him off. "Young man, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is completely inappropriate. You're disrupting my son's wedding." "Your son's wedding," Harrison repeated slowly. "Right. That's actually what this is about." He turned to face the full room, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "My name is Harrison Wells. I'm David's best man and also his attorney. About 3 weeks ago, David came to me concerned about some documents he'd found in Emily's apartment. Documents that raised serious questions about the nature of this marriage." Emily's face went pale. "Harrison, don't you dare." "Documents," Harrison continued, ignoring her, "that included a notarized will leaving all of Margaret Thompson's assets to Emily, drafted just 2 months ago. A will Mrs. Thompson knew nothing about." The room exploded in noise. Gasps, exclamations, shocked whispers. I stood there unable to process what I was hearing. A will. I hadn't drafted any will. I hadn't signed anything. Harrison opened his portfolio and pulled out papers. "I have copies here, along with text messages between Emily and Patricia Harrison discussing how to manage Margaret's assets after the wedding. Messages about putting her in a care facility against her will. Messages about selling her house and keeping the proceeds." "That's a lie," Emily shouted. "He's lying. David, tell them he's lying." But David wasn't defending her. David was staring at his new wife like he'd never seen her before, his face a mixture of betrayal and dawning horror.
Harrison continued, his lawyer voice calm and methodical. "I also have messages between Emily and Patricia discussing how to isolate Margaret from the family, how to make her look unstable, how to ensure she had no legal recourse when they took control of her finances." He looked directly at me. "Mrs. Thompson, did you sign a power of attorney giving Emily control over your assets?" "No," I whispered. Then louder. "No, I never signed anything like that." That's what I thought. Harrison pulled out more papers. Because the signature on the power of attorney documents doesn't match your signature on your driver's license or your late husband's death certificate. It's a forgery. Not even a good one. The room fell silent except for Emily's rapid breathing. She looked trapped, desperate. This is insane. Harrison, why are you doing this? We were friends. We were, Harrison agreed. Until I realized you were using David to commit elder abuse and fraud against your own mother. David had no idea, by the way. He found the documents by accident when looking for your passport. He came to me thinking there must be some explanation. Some reason this would all make sense. David's voice was hollow. I wanted you to tell me I was wrong. That I'd misunderstood. But she couldn't, Harrison said. Because it's all true. Every word. He turned back to the crowd. Emily Harrison, née Thompson, and Patricia Harrison have been planning for months to take control of Margaret Thompson's assets. Assets that include a house worth approximately $400,000, a pension fund, savings accounts, and a life insurance policy. They plan to have Margaret declared incompetent, institutionalize her, and liquidate everything. Patricia finally found her voice. This is slander. I'll have your license for this. It's not slander if it's true, Harrison replied. And I have proof. Months of text, emails, even a recorded conversation between you and Emily discussing which facility would be cheapest to keep Margaret in. He looked at me, and his expression softened. Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry you're learning about this like this. But David and I agreed you needed to know. Everyone needed to know. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. My daughter. My only child. The baby I'd held. The toddler I'd comforted through nightmares. The teenager I'd supported through heartbreaks. She'd been planning to steal from me. To lock me away. To erase me. The silence in that enormous room was suffocating. 300 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Emily stood at the altar in her beautiful white dress, looking like she might either scream or run. Patricia had gone rigid, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. David looked like someone had punched him in the stomach, pale and shaking. Harrison wasn't finished. The will that Emily had drafted in Mrs. Thompson's name was notarized 3 weeks ago. The notary is someone I know professionally, and when I showed him Mrs. Thompson's actual signature, he confirmed it didn't match. He's filing a report with the state board as we speak. Harrison pulled out his phone and held it up. I also have audio recordings. Patricia, would you like me to play the one where you and Emily discussed timing the wedding so Margaret wouldn't have time to interfere with your plans? Don't you dare, Patricia hissed. But Harrison was already pressing play. His phone volume was turned all the way up. Patricia's voice filled the ceremony space, tinny but unmistakable. We need to move fast after the wedding. Get her declared incompetent before she realizes what's happening. My physician friend owes me a favor. He'll sign whatever evaluation we need. Then it's just paperwork and a judge who understands that elderly people need supervision for their own good. Then Emily's voice. What about her friends? The neighbors? People know her. Patricia again. She's isolated already. You've done well making sure she doesn't see people regularly. Once we have legal control, we move her to a facility in another state. Out of sight, out of mind. People forget quickly. Emily. And the house sells fast. Patricia. In that neighborhood, 3 weeks maximum. We price it right, accept the first decent offer, split the proceeds. By the time anyone questions anything, it'll be too late to undo. Harrison stopped the recording. The silence was somehow worse than before. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this nightmare unfold from somewhere above. That was my daughter's voice. My daughter, casually discussing erasing me from my own life like I was a problem to be solved, not a person. Emily tried one more time. That recording is illegal. You can't use that in court. Maybe, Harrison agreed. But it's not illegal to play it at a wedding in front of 300 witnesses. And Mrs. Thompson can absolutely use it to press criminal charges. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, forgery, identity theft. The list goes on. George Harrison finally spoke. David's father had been sitting quietly in the front row, but now he stood up. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a kind of presence that comes from decades of commanding boardrooms. He looked at his wife with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, betrayal, disgust, maybe all three. "Patricia," he said quietly, "tell me this isn't true." Patricia's mask cracked. "George, you don't understand. That woman is nobody. She has nothing to offer Emily. She's just dead weight holding our daughter-in-law back from the life she deserves." "Our daughter-in-law," George repeated slowly, "who was planning to commit multiple felonies against her own mother. With your help." He looked at Emily and his voice went cold. "Did my son know about any of this?" "No," Harrison answered before Emily could. "David found the documents by accident 2 days ago. He came to me immediately. He's been sick about this, trying to figure out what to do." David finally spoke, his voice breaking. "I thought I was wrong. I thought there had to be an explanation. Emily, I gave you so many chances to tell me the truth. Last night at the rehearsal dinner. This morning before the ceremony. I kept asking if there was anything you needed to tell me. Anything at all." Emily reached for him. "David, please. You don't understand. She's my mother, but she's also a burden. She doesn't have much time left anyway, and—" "Stop talking," David cut her off. "Just stop." He looked at the officiant, who'd been standing frozen behind them throughout this entire disaster. "Is the marriage legal? We signed the certificate, but—" The officiant, an older woman who looked like she'd seen a lot in her career but nothing quite like this, cleared her throat. "The certificate needs to be filed with the county to be official. If it's not filed within 30 days, the marriage is void." David nodded slowly. "Then it won't be filed." He looked at Emily, and there was nothing but emptiness in his eyes. "I can't be married to someone who would do this. To anyone, but especially to their own mother." "David, no." Emily grabbed his arm. "You can't do this to me. We're married. This is our wedding day."
"We're not married," David said, pulling away from her. "Not legally. And even if we were, this would end in annulment. You lied to me. You used me. You were planning to commit crimes, and you thought I'd just go along with it once we were married, and it was too late." Patricia tried a different approach. "David's son, think about what you're throwing away here. Emily loves you. She made a mistake, but—" "She made a choice," Harrison interrupted. "Multiple choices over months. This wasn't a mistake. This was a conspiracy." George Harrison cleared his throat, and the room's attention shifted to him. He had the kind of authority that comes from years of running businesses and making difficult decisions. When he spoke, even Patricia went quiet. "Harrison," George said, "you mentioned criminal charges. What exactly are we looking at here?" Harrison straightened, slipping into full attorney mode. "Mrs. Thompson has grounds to file charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted forgery, identity theft, and elder abuse. In this state, conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse is a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. The forged documents add another 3 to 5 years. The financial exploitation aspect could add more. We're looking at serious prison time if prosecuted fully." Emily made a sound like a wounded animal. No, this can't be happening." "It is happening," Harrison said flatly. "And it's happening because you chose to victimize your own mother." He turned to me, and his expression softened again. "Mrs. Thompson, the decision about pressing charges is entirely yours. But you should know that David and I have already filed reports with Adult Protective Services and the State Attorney General's office. There will be investigations regardless of what you decide." I still couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything I'd heard in the last 10 minutes. My daughter had planned to imprison me, steal from me, erase me. And she'd gotten David's mother to help her do it. How long had they been planning this? How long had Emily looked at me and seen nothing but dollar signs? One of the guests stood up. An older woman in an elegant navy dress. I'm Judge Catherine Reynolds, she announced. I'm retired, but I still maintain my legal credentials. I've witnessed everything that's happened here today, and I want to state for the record that if Mrs. Thompson chooses to press charges, I'll provide testimony. What I've heard described as elder abuse, and it's unconscionable. Another person stood, a middle-aged man in a gray suit. I'm Thomas Chun, certified public accountant. I'll also testify if needed. Financial crimes against elderly people are something I take very seriously. Then another person. And another. Within minutes, at least 20 people had stood up, offering to serve as witnesses. These were Patricia's guests, people from her social circle, but they were volunteering to testify against her. The look on Patricia's face was pure horror. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing. George looked at his wife with something like grief. How could you do this? How could you be part of something so cruel? I was helping our family, Patricia said desperately. Emily deserves better than starting married life worried about her mother's finances. I was just trying to solve a problem efficiently. By abusing an elderly woman? By forging documents? By planning to lock someone away against their will? George shook his head. I don't know who you are anymore. He turned to me, and his eyes were sad. Mrs. Thompson, I am so deeply sorry. I had no knowledge of any of this. If I had known, I would have stopped it immediately. I believed him. George Harrison might be wealthy and powerful, but there was genuine horror in his eyes. He hadn't known. His wife had done this behind his back. David walked away from Emily, crossing the space between us until he was standing in front of me. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I should have figured this out sooner. I should have questioned things earlier. I loved her. I thought I knew her. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. You found out, I managed to say. My voice sounded strange, distant. You and Harrison stopped it. That's what matters. Harrison joined us, still carrying his portfolio. Mrs. Thompson, I've taken the liberty of contacting a colleague who specializes in elder law. She's waiting to speak with you whenever you're ready. In the meantime, I have copies of all the evidence. The forged will, the fake power of attorney, the text messages, the recordings. Everything is documented and secured. What happens now? I asked. Harrison glanced at Emily and Patricia, both of whom looked like they wanted to bolt. That depends on what you want to happen. You can press criminal charges, which I strongly recommend. You can file civil suits for emotional distress and attempted fraud. You can seek restraining orders. Or you can walk away and let the state investigations proceed without your active involvement. But I want you to understand something important. He waited until I looked directly at him before continuing. If you don't press charges, there's a chance they face no real consequences. Patricia has money and connections. Emily is young and could claim she was manipulated. The system isn't always great at holding people accountable for crimes that didn't technically succeed. But if you step forward, if you make this official, you give prosecutors everything they need to ensure this never happens to you or anyone else these women encounter. I looked at my daughter. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, her beautiful wedding dress suddenly looking like a costume. How had we gotten here? When had the baby I'd rocked to sleep become someone capable of this kind of cruelty? Why? I asked her. My voice was stronger now. Why would you do this to me? Emily wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup worse. You don't understand what it's like. Being compared to everyone else. Having a mother who's just ordinary. Patricia's children have trust funds and family businesses. David's friends all come from important families. And I have a mother who lives in a tiny house and drives an old car and worked as a teacher's wife. The words hit me like physical blows. Emily's voice was bitter, resentful, filled with an anger I'd never fully seen before. She was still talking, her words tumbling out like poison she'd been holding inside for years. Do you know what it's like to introduce you to people and watch them lose interest the moment they realize you're nobody? To have Patricia ask questions about family wealth and accomplishments and have nothing impressive to say? You were a burden, Mom. A reminder that I came from nothing. You came from love, I said quietly. You came from a home where you were cherished. Your father and I gave you everything we had. You gave me mediocrity, Emily shot back. You gave me a childhood in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom and used furniture. You gave me a father who smelled like chalk dust and a mother who clipped coupons. I wanted more. I deserved more. Patricia was nodding along like Emily was finally saying things that made sense. Emily has ambition, Margaret. She's destined for better things than the life you lived. We were helping her achieve her potential. George made a disgusted sound. By committing crimes? By abusing a woman who never did anything except love her daughter. He looked at Patricia like he was seeing her for the first time. I've put up with a lot over the years. Your social climbing. Your obsession with status. Your need to control everything and everyone. But this is beyond anything I imagined you capable of. Don't you dare take the moral high ground with me, Patricia snapped. You've built your entire empire on being ruthless. On crushing competitors and doing whatever it takes to win. I learned from watching you. I've never targeted innocent people, George said coldly. I've never abused the vulnerable. And I've certainly never conspired to imprison someone against their will. There's a difference between hard business and criminal cruelty. Harrison cleared his throat. We're getting off track. Mrs. Thompson, I need to know what you want to do. The longer we wait, the more chance these two have to coordinate their stories or hide evidence. I looked around the room. 300 people watching me. Wealthy, successful people from David's world. People who probably agreed with Emily that I was nobody special. But they'd stood up. They'd offered to testify. They'd been horrified by what Emily and Patricia had done. Maybe I was ordinary, but that didn't mean I deserved to be erased. I want to press charges, I said clearly. All of them. Emily gasped. Mom, no. Please. I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself, I replied. You planned to lock me away. To steal everything I have. To erase me like I never mattered. I spent 72 years building a life. It might not be impressive to you, but it's mine. And you don't get to take it from me. Harrison nodded, already pulling out his phone. I'm calling the police now. Given the severity of the crimes and the evidence we have, I expect they'll take both Emily and Patricia into custody for questioning today. You can't arrest me at my son's wedding. Patricia shrieked. It's not a wedding anymore, George said flatly. It's a crime scene. Harrison, make the call. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Harrison spoke with police dispatch. George called his own attorney. Several guests were calling people they knew in law enforcement or legal circles. David sat in the front row with his head in his hands, his best man's duties long forgotten. And Emily and Patricia huddled together, whispering frantically, probably trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. I sat down in my third-row seat. The same seat Emily had assigned me, because I wasn't important enough for the front row. It felt like years had passed since the ceremony started. Like I'd aged a decade in an afternoon. Judge Reynolds came over and sat beside me. Mrs. Thompson, I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know you're doing the right thing. I've seen too many cases like this, where families take advantage of elderly relatives and get away with it because the victims are too ashamed or scared to press charges. You're being brave. I don't feel brave, I admitted. I feel broken. That's normal, she said gently. You're grieving, not just for what happened, but for the relationship you thought you had with your daughter. That grief is real, and it's going to take time to process. But you're protecting yourself. That's what matters right now. 2 police officers arrived about 15 minutes later. They spoke with Harrison first, reviewing the evidence he'd compiled. Then they interviewed several witnesses, including Judge Reynolds and Thomas Chun and others who'd stood up to offer testimony. The officers' expressions grew grimmer as they heard the details. Finally, they approached Emily and Patricia. Emily Thompson and Patricia Harrison, you need to come with us for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and identity theft. I'm not going anywhere, Patricia said imperiously. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is? Yes, ma'am, one officer said patiently. And we know the law. You can come voluntarily, or we can arrest you here. Your choice. George stepped in. Patricia, go with them. Don't make this worse. I'll have our attorney meet you at the station. Patricia's face cycled through several emotions. Rage, disbelief, fear, and finally something that might have been resignation. She looked at George like she expected him to save her, to use his money and influence to make this all go away. But George just stared back at her with an expression of cold disappointment. Fine, Patricia said icily. But you'll regret this. All of you. She looked directly at me, and her voice dropped to something venomous. You're making a huge mistake. You could have lived out your remaining years comfortably in a nice facility. Now you're going to be alone. Emily will never forgive you. And believe me, Margaret, you need her more than she needs you. That's enough, one of the officers said firmly. Ma'am, anything else you say can and will be used against you. Patricia finally seemed to realize she should stop talking. She gathered her expensive handbag and walked toward the exit, head held high like she was leaving by choice rather than being escorted for questioning about felonies. The officer followed her closely. Emily was crying harder now. "Mom, please. Please don't do this. I made a mistake, but I'm still your daughter. I'm all you have. If you press charges, you'll lose me forever." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange sense of clarity settle over me. "Emily, I lost you a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. The daughter I raised would never have done this. That daughter disappeared years ago, and I kept pretending she was still there because I couldn't face the truth." "That's not fair," Emily sobbed. "None of this is fair," I agreed. "But it's reality. And sweetheart, you need to understand something. I didn't lose you today. You lost me. You had a mother who loved you unconditionally, and you threw that away because I wasn't rich enough or impressive enough for your new life. That's your loss, not mine." The second officer approached Emily. "Ms. Thompson, we need you to come with us now." Emily looked at David one last time. "Please. David, please tell them you'll still marry me. Tell them this was all a misunderstanding." David didn't even look at her. He just shook his head slowly, staring at his hands. "Ms. Thompson," the officer said again, gently but firmly. Emily finally let them lead her away. Her beautiful wedding dress dragged on the floor, the crystals still catching the light. She looked back at me once from the doorway, and I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Not remorse. Not apology. Anger. Pure anger that her plan had failed and she'd been caught. Then she was gone, and the ceremony space felt suddenly empty despite still holding hundreds of people. George walked over to where David and I were sitting. "Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know that the Harrison family will cover any legal expenses you incur from this situation. You shouldn't have to pay to defend yourself against crimes my wife helped plan." "That's very generous," Harrison said before I could respond. "But Mrs. Thompson should have her own attorney, one with no connection to your family." "No offense intended, George, but it's cleaner that way." "None taken," George said. "Then I'll cover her legal fees directly. Whatever she needs." He looked at me with genuine remorse. "I am so deeply sorry. If there's anything I can do to make this even slightly better, please tell me. You can make sure your wife faces consequences," I said quietly. "And you can make sure no one else's mother goes through what I almost went through." "I will," George promised. "I absolutely will." The guests started filing out slowly, talking in hushed, shocked tones. This would be the story they told for years. The wedding that turned into a criminal investigation. The beautiful ceremony that revealed ugly truths. I heard snatches of conversation as people passed. "Never seen anything like it. Poor woman. Can't believe Patricia was involved. That daughter should be ashamed." David finally spoke. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't know what to say. I feel like I should have known. Should have seen signs." "You did see signs," Harrison reminded him. "That's why you came to me with the documents. You trusted your instincts." "But not soon enough," David said miserably. "I was so close to marrying her. If I'd waited one more day to look through that box, if I hadn't found those papers." "But you did find them," I said. "And you did the right thing. That takes courage, David. It would have been easier to ignore it, to pretend you hadn't seen anything." "I couldn't," David said simply. "My dad raised me better than that." George put a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you. I know this hurts, but you did the right thing." Harrison checked his phone. The officers just texted. "Both Emily and Patricia are at the station. They're being processed now. Mrs. Thompson, you'll need to give a formal statement within the next 24 hours. I can arrange for the elder law attorney I mentioned to be with you when you do." "Thank you," I said. Everything felt surreal. This morning I'd been getting ready for my daughter's wedding. Now I was pressing criminal charges against her. How did life turn upside down so completely in just a few hours? Judge Reynolds came back over. "Mrs. Thompson, I took the liberty of writing down the names and contact information of everyone who offered to testify. There are 23 people total." She handed me a piece of paper. "Don't hesitate to use these names. Character witnesses can be powerful in cases like this." The ceremony venue slowly emptied until it was just me, Harrison, David, George, and a few staff members cleaning up. The flowers were still beautiful. The decorations were still perfect. But it all felt hollow now, like props for a play that had ended badly. George dismissed the staff, telling them they'd still be paid for the full day despite the ceremony ending early. Then he sat down heavily in one of the front row chairs. 28 years I've been married to Patricia. I thought I knew her. Yes, she's status conscious. Yes, she cares too much about appearances. But this? Planning to abuse an elderly woman? I never would have believed it. People show you who they are, Harrison said quietly. Sometimes it just takes the right circumstances to reveal it. David was still sitting with his head in his hands. I'm such an idiot. All the signs were there. The way Emily talked about her mom. The way she'd get annoyed whenever Mrs. Thompson called. The way Patricia encouraged that behavior. I just thought it was normal family tension. It's not your fault, I told him, though part of me was still reeling from my own denial. I'd seen signs too. Emily's growing distance. Her embarrassment about my background. Her reluctance to include me in wedding planning. I'd just convinced myself it was a phase, that she'd come back to me eventually. Harrison sat down next to me. Mrs. Thompson, I need to prepare you for what comes next. The legal process is going to be lengthy and probably painful. Emily and Patricia will likely get attorneys who'll try to discredit you or paint this as a misunderstanding. They might claim you're confused or suffering from cognitive decline. I'm not confused, I said firmly. And there's nothing wrong with my mind. I know that, Harrison assured me. But they'll try. That's why we need to document everything. I want you to see a physician for a full evaluation proving your cognitive health. I want you to meet with the elder law attorney to protect all your assets legally. And I want you to write down everything you remember about Emily's behavior over the past few years. Every comment she made. Every time she tried to distance you from your life. All of it. It sounded exhausting. But I nodded. Okay, whatever it takes. George pulled out his phone. I'm calling my personal physician right now. Dr. Morrison has been our family doctor for 20 years. He's discreet, thorough, and he owes me favors. He can do a complete evaluation and provide documentation that will hold up in any court. While George made the call, Harrison opened his portfolio again. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to look at these documents and tell me if you've ever seen them before. He handed me papers. The forged will was first. It was dated 2 months ago, supposedly signed by me in the presence of a notary. The signature looked vaguely like mine, but anyone who knew my handwriting would see it was wrong. The flourish I always did on the M was missing. The spacing was off. It was a decent forgery, but not good enough. The will left everything to Emily. My house. My savings. My pension. Robert's life insurance policy. Everything. There was a clause about covering end-of-life care in an appropriate facility, which I realized was code for the prison they'd planned to put me in. I've never seen this before, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I never signed this. I never even discussed making a new will with anyone. Harrison nodded. That's what I expected. Now look at this. The next document was a power of attorney giving Emily control over all my financial and medical decisions. It was dated the same day as the fake will. The signature was equally bad, with the same mistakes. Whoever had forged these had probably practiced my signature from something they'd seen, but not well enough. Never saw this either, I confirmed. Good, Harrison said, making notes. Now these. He handed me printed screenshots of text messages. I read through them with growing horror. Messages between Emily and Patricia planning everything in detail. Discussing which facility would take me. How to liquidate my assets quickly. How to prevent me from contacting friends or neighbors. How to time everything so I'd be completely trapped before I realized what was happening. One exchange made my stomach turn. Emily, what if she fights back? What if she gets a lawyer? Patricia, she won't. She's too passive. She's spent her whole life being agreeable and afraid of conflict. By the time she realizes she should fight, it'll be too late. Emily, and if I feel guilty? Patricia, you're securing your future. David's family expects a certain lifestyle. Your mother's assets will help you maintain that. She'd want you to be happy, wouldn't she? Emily, I guess. It still feels wrong sometimes. Patricia, that feeling will pass. Trust me. I handed the phone back to Harrison. I couldn't read anymore. They really believed I'd just accept it. That I was too weak to fight back. They underestimated you, Harrison said. A lot of people do that with older women. They assume you're helpless or confused or too scared to stand up for yourself. It's a form of ageism, and it's what allows elder abuse to happen so often. George finished his call. Dr. Morrison can see you tomorrow morning at 9. He'll do a full physical and cognitive evaluation. He'll also document any signs of stress or trauma from this situation. Thank you, I said. I felt overwhelmed by the kindness these men were showing me. George and David and Harrison didn't know me. They had no obligation to help me. But they were going above and beyond. David finally looked up, his eyes red. "Mrs. Thompson, I have a question. And I'll understand if you don't want to answer. But, when did you first start noticing Emily pulling away?" I thought about it, going back through years of memories. Honestly, it started in college. She went to state on a full scholarship. Robert and I were so proud. But when she'd come home for holidays, she'd make little comments about other students' families. Their vacation homes. Their cars. Their connections. She started to seem embarrassed by our house, by our neighborhood. Did it get worse after she graduated? Much worse. She moved to the city and got a job at a marketing firm. Started making good money. She'd visit less and less. When she did come, she'd look around our home like she was seeing it for the first time and finding it lacking. She suggested we update things, which really meant make everything more expensive looking. David nodded slowly. She told me her parents were gone. Both of them. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? When we first started dating. She said her mother had passed away years ago, and her father before that. She said she was alone in the world. David looked sick. I believed her. I felt sorry for her. It was one of the things that drew me to her, this idea that she'd overcome so much loss. Harrison swore under his breath. "That's cold. That's exceptionally cold. She erased me," I said slowly, the full impact hitting me. She didn't just plan to erase me in the future. She'd already erased me from her past. I was already dead to her. George looked furious. "David, why didn't you mention this before?" "I didn't know Mrs. Thompson existed until 3 weeks ago," David said miserably. "Emily told me she had no family. No one to invite to the wedding from her side. Patricia suggested that was actually convenient, that it meant we could invite more of our family and friends without worrying about balancing the guest list." "So the wedding invitation list," I said, pieces falling into place, "that wasn't about me not having people to invite. Emily told you I was dead, so she wouldn't have to include me at all." "But then what changed?" Harrison asked. If Emily had successfully convinced David she had no family, why surface Mrs. Thompson now for the wedding? David had the answer. "My grandmother. My dad's mother. She's 94 and very traditional. When she heard I was getting engaged, she insisted on meeting my future wife's family. All of them. She said it wasn't proper to marry someone without knowing their people." George nodded. "My mother can be very stubborn about tradition. When David told her Emily had no living family, she didn't buy it. She's from a generation that didn't trust anyone who claimed to have no connections. She made David do research. I hired a private investigator," David admitted. "I felt terrible about it, but Grandma wouldn't let it go. The investigator came back with your information within 2 days. Your name, address, phone number. Proof that you were very much alive. And then," I prompted. "Then I confronted Emily. She cried. She said she'd lied because your relationship was complicated and painful. She said you'd been abusive when she was growing up, that you'd tried to control her life, that cutting you off had been necessary for her mental health." I closed my eyes. More lies. Layer upon layer of lies. "I wanted to believe her," David continued. "But something felt off. So I told her that if she wanted to marry me, she needed to reconcile with you. Or at least make peace with whatever had happened. Grandma was never going to accept a wedding without the bride's mother present. So Emily had to bring me back from the dead," I said bitterly. "Not because she wanted me there, but because your grandmother required it." "I'm so sorry," David said again. Harrison was making notes. "This is actually good information legally. It establishes premeditation and a pattern of deception. Emily didn't just recently decide to abuse her mother. She'd been working on isolating and erasing her for years." "The lunch," I said suddenly, remembering. 3 months ago, when Emily told me I had to sit in the 3rd row instead of the front. She acted like it was about space, about David's large family. But really it was about making me invisible. She'd already told David I was dead. She couldn't have me in the front row looking like the mother of the bride, because that would contradict her story. She was managing contradictions, Harrison agreed. Trying to keep her lies straight while including you just enough to satisfy David's grandmother. George was pacing now. Patricia knew all of this. She had to have known. She and Emily were planning this together. "Did your wife know Emily had told David that her mother was dead?" Harrison asked. "I don't know," George admitted. Patricia handled most of the wedding planning with Emily. They spent hours together. I stayed out of it mostly, figured it was mother and daughter bonding. He laughed bitterly. Mother and daughter. I guess in a twisted way it was. The venue's event coordinator approached cautiously. Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the space. We have another event scheduled tonight, and we need time to reset. George pulled out his wallet. Cancel the next event. Pay them whatever they were going to make plus 20%. I'll cover it. Sir, that's not up for discussion, George said firmly. This situation requires privacy and time. Make it happen. The coordinator nodded and hurried away. George turned back to us. We're not being rushed through this. Take whatever time you need. Harrison checked his watch. Mrs. Thompson should probably go home soon. This has been an incredibly traumatic day, and you need rest. But before you go, we should secure your house. Secure it? I asked. Emily has a key, doesn't she? I nodded slowly. She's had one since she was 16. Then we need to assume she might try to access your home to destroy evidence, or take things she thinks she's entitled to. Even though she's at the police station now, she'll likely be released within a few hours. They can question her, but without charging her formally, they can't hold her long. David stood up. I'll go with Mrs. Thompson to her house. We can change the locks right away. There's a locksmith in my phone who does emergency calls. I'll come too, Harrison said. 3 people are better than 2 if Emily or Patricia shows up. George nodded. I'll stay here and handle the fallout. There are going to be questions from guests, calls from people wanting to know what happened. I'll manage the social aspect. 20 minutes later, I was in David's car heading toward my house. Harrison followed in his own vehicle. The drive took 40 minutes, which gave me time to think about what I was going home to. My little house. The house Robert and I had bought 40 years ago when we were young and hopeful. The house we'd raised Emily in. The house she was ashamed of. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in an older neighborhood. The yard needed work. The paint needed updating. But it was mine. Robert had died in the bedroom we'd shared for decades. His presence was still in every corner. And Emily had planned to take it from me, sell it, and pocket the money. When we pulled into my driveway, I noticed David looking at the house with interest. It's nice, he said. Good bones. Mature trees. Established neighborhood. These older homes have character. Emily didn't think so, I said quietly. Emily doesn't know what matters, David replied. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Coffee cup in the sink. Photo albums still on the kitchen table. The beige dress I'd worn to the wedding would probably end up in the trash. I never wanted to see it again. Harrison called the locksmith while David walked through the house with me. Do you have any important documents? Deeds, titles, bank information, that kind of thing. In the file cabinet in the spare bedroom, I said. We went through my files together. Everything seemed to be there. Birth certificates. Robert's death certificate. The deed to the house. Bank statements. My will, the real one, leaving everything to Emily despite what she'd done. I'd need to change that now. You should get a safe deposit box, Harrison said when he found us. Keep original documents there, not in your home. If Emily has been in your house unsupervised, she might have photographed documents she needed for the forgeries. My stomach turned. She visited about a month ago. Said she wanted to have lunch and look through old photo albums. I left her alone in here while I made sandwiches. She was in the spare bedroom for at least 20 minutes. Then she had access to everything, Harrison confirmed. She probably photographed your signature from multiple documents to practice the forgery. The locksmith arrived within an hour. While he worked on changing all the locks, front door, back door, and the side door to the garage, David made tea. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd had breakfast thousands of times. Where Emily had done her homework as a child. Where Robert and I had shared quiet mornings before he got sick. What happens now? I asked Harrison. Several things in parallel. First, the police investigation. They'll interview Emily and Patricia, gather evidence, and present findings to the district attorney. The DA will decide whether to file formal charges. Given the evidence we have, I'd say charges are likely. How long does that take? Could be weeks or months. The system moves slowly. In the meantime, you'll need to secure your assets. I recommend changing banks entirely, not just account numbers. Open new accounts at a different institution. Update all your legal documents with an attorney who specializes in elder law. Set up safeguards so no one can access your assets without multiple verifications. David added sugar to his tea. What about restraining orders? Good thought, Harrison said. Mrs. Thompson, you can file for restraining orders against both Emily and Patricia. Given the circumstances, a judge would likely grant them. That would legally prevent them from contacting you or coming near your home. The locksmith finished his work and handed me 3 sets of new keys. All secure now, ma'am. Different locks, different keys. Nobody's getting in without your permission. After he left, the 3 of us sat in my living room. David looked around at the family photos on the walls. Robert and me on our wedding day. Emily as a baby. Emily's school pictures through the years. Emily graduating high school. In every picture, she was smiling. In most of them, I was right beside her. She looks happy, David said quietly. She was, I replied. Or I thought she was. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. Harrison set down his tea. Mrs. Thompson, I want to talk about something difficult. Your relationship with Emily going forward. Even if she faces criminal charges, even if she's convicted, she's still your daughter. You're going to have to decide what that means to you. What do you mean? I mean you'll have choices to make. Do you want a relationship with her at all after this? Do you want to leave the door open for reconciliation someday? Or do you want a complete separation? There's no wrong answer, but you should think about it before lawyers and courts force you to make decisions under pressure. I looked at Emily's kindergarten picture on the wall. She was missing her 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera with complete trust and joy. I don't know, I admitted. Right now I don't want to see her or talk to her. Right now I'm so angry I can barely think straight. But she's still my child. The baby I held. Does that feeling ever go away completely? I don't know, Harrison said honestly. I'm not a parent. But I can tell you from legal experience that elder abuse cases involving family members are the hardest emotionally. Because the victim has to choose between protecting themselves and maintaining family connections. It's an impossible position. David spoke up. My grandmother had a sister who stole from her. Forged checks, took jewelry, even tried to sell property that wasn't hers. Grandma pressed charges. Her sister went to prison for 3 years. When she got out, she apologized and wanted to reconnect. Grandma refused. Said some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Did she regret it? I asked. No. She said she grieved the sister she thought she had, but she couldn't have a relationship with the sister who actually existed. Those were 2 different people. That resonated with me. I was grieving the daughter I thought I had. The daughter who'd loved me and needed me and would never hurt me. But that daughter might never have existed. Maybe I'd been projecting my hopes onto a child who grew into someone I didn't recognize. Harrison's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. The police have released Emily and Patricia. No formal charges yet, but they're under investigation. They both had to surrender their passports. And here's something interesting. David, your mother hired criminal defense attorney Marcus Blackwell. David groaned. Blackwell is the guy who defended that CEO who embezzled millions from his own company. He's expensive and ruthless. He's also very good, Harrison acknowledged. Which means Patricia is taking this seriously. She's going to fight. What about Emily? I asked. Harrison scrolled through his phone. Looks like Blackwell is representing both of them. Patricia must be paying for Emily's defense too. George was right when he said his wife had resources and connections. Patricia wasn't going to go down quietly. She'd fight with every advantage money could buy. And she'd drag Emily along with her, probably coaching her on exactly what to say and how to appear sympathetic. We need to be prepared for them to go on the offensive, Harrison said. Blackwell's strategy will likely involve discrediting you. They'll paint Emily as a concerned daughter who is worried about her aging mother's welfare. They'll say the documents were misunderstood. They'll claim the conversations were taken out of context. But you have recordings, David protested, which Blackwell will try to get excluded as evidence. He'll argue they were obtained illegally or without consent. He'll fight every piece of evidence we have. I felt exhausted suddenly. The adrenaline that had carried me through the last few hours was wearing off, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. I just want this to be over. It won't be over for a while, Harrison said gently. But you don't have to face it alone. David and I are going to help you. George is committed to making sure you have resources. And you have 23 witnesses who volunteered to testify on your behalf. David checked his own phone. Dad just texted. The story is already spreading on social media. Several guests posted about what happened. It's going viral. Harrison looked concerned. That's a double-edged sword. Public awareness might pressure prosecutors to act, but it also means Emily and Patricia will face trial by social media. Is that my problem? I asked more sharply than I intended. No, Harrison said immediately. It's not. They created this situation. They have to deal with the consequences. We talked for another hour, Harrison outlining the legal steps ahead and David taking notes on his phone. Tomorrow I'd meet with Dr. Morrison for the medical evaluation. The day after, I had an appointment with the elder law attorney Harrison recommended. By the end of the week, I'd need to file formal police reports and potentially testify before a grand jury if the district attorney moved forward with charges. It was overwhelming, but Harrison and David broke it down into manageable steps. They made lists. They created timelines. They gave me structure when everything felt chaotic. Before they left, David wrote down his personal cell phone number. Call me anytime, he said. Day or night. If you're scared, if you need something, if you just want to talk. I mean it. You didn't ask to be dragged into my family's mess, and I'm not going to abandon you now. After they left, I locked the new locks and stood in my quiet house. It was barely 7 in the evening, but it felt like midnight. This morning I'd been getting ready for a wedding. Now I was preparing for a legal battle against my own daughter. How had my life become this? I walked through each room slowly, looking at everything with new eyes. The furniture Emily had called dated. The decorations she'd said needed updating. The kitchen she'd implied was embarrassing. None of it was fancy, but all of it was mine. Robert and I had chosen every piece together. We'd built this life with love and intention. In the bedroom, I found the jewelry box Robert had given me on our 40th anniversary. Inside was my wedding ring, his wedding ring, the pearl necklace, and a few other pieces. Nothing expensive. Nothing Patricia Harrison would consider worth having. But priceless to me. I took out Robert's ring and held it, remembering his hands. He'd been a good man. A kind man. A man who'd valued character over status and love over money. What would he think of Emily now? Would he be heartbroken? Angry? Disappointed? All of the above, probably. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Thompson? A woman's voice. This is Rachel Foster. I was at the wedding today. I'm calling because I wanted you to know that you're not alone. What happened was terrible, but you handled it with grace. Thank you, I managed to say. I mean it. I've seen elder abuse in my own family. My aunt's children tried something similar. She was too afraid to fight back, and they got away with it. But you're fighting. You're setting an example. That matters. After Rachel, there were 3 more calls. Different guests from the wedding, all calling to offer support. One was an attorney who specialized in estate planning. One was a woman who ran a support group for elder abuse survivors. One was simply someone who wanted to say she believed me and was willing to testify if needed. By the time the calls stopped, it was after 9. I made myself eat something, though I barely tasted it. Then I sat down and did what Harrison had suggested. I started writing down everything I could remember about Emily's behavior over the past few years. Every comment, every slight, every time she'd pulled away or expressed embarrassment about her background. The list grew longer than I expected. Page after page of small cruelties I'd minimized or explained away. Taken individually, each incident seemed minor. But together, they painted a picture of a daughter systematically distancing herself from a mother she considered inadequate. I wrote until after midnight, until my hand cramped and my eyes burned. Then I saved the document, both on my computer and on a flash drive Harrison had given me. Evidence. Testimony. The story of how I lost my daughter long before she tried to steal my life. That night, I barely slept. When I did doze off, I had dreams of Emily as a little girl, calling for me. But when I'd reach her in the dream, she'd look at me with Patricia's cold eyes and walk away. Morning came too soon. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, and drove to Dr. Morrison's office. George had arranged everything. The receptionist was expecting me and walked me straight back to an exam room. Dr. Morrison was in his 60s, professional but kind. He spent 3 hours with me. Physical examination, blood work, cognitive tests, memory assessments, questions about my medical history, my daily life, my mental state. He was thorough and patient, explaining everything he was doing and why. Mrs. Thompson, he said at the end, I want to be clear about my findings. You are in excellent health for your age. Your cognitive function is completely normal. Your memory is sharp. Your reasoning is sound. There is absolutely no medical basis for anyone to claim you're incompetent or unable to manage your own affairs. You'll put that in writing? Already typing the report, he confirmed. I'll have it notarized and sent to your attorney by end of business today. If anyone tries to claim you're diminished or confused, this documentation will refute it completely. Relief washed over me. I hadn't realized how worried I'd been that somehow Emily and Patricia would succeed in painting me as incompetent. But I had proof now. Medical proof that I was fine. The rest of the week blurred together. Meetings with attorneys. Sessions with the police giving formal statements. Calls from the district attorney's office. And through it all, David and Harrison were there, helping me navigate systems I didn't understand. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I received word that formal charges had been filed. Emily Thompson and Patricia Harrison were being charged with conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted fraud, forgery, and identity theft. They'd both pleaded not guilty. Trial was set for 6 months out. I stood in my kitchen, reading the legal documents, and felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but resolution. Clarity. I was 72 years old. I'd spent 50 years being a mother first. But maybe it was time to be Margaret first. To protect myself. To value myself. To recognize that I deserved better than what Emily had tried to do. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Verdict came back. Are you okay? I texted back. I will be. And somehow I knew it was true. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a chapter one never expected to write. A chapter about standing up for myself. About learning that being ordinary didn't mean being worthless. About discovering that sometimes the family you deserve isn't the family you're born into. I looked at Emily's kindergarten picture one more time. Then I took it off the wall and put it in a box in the closet. Maybe someday I'd want to look at it again. Maybe someday the grief would soften into something bearable. But not today. Today, I was choosing myself. And that was enough.